Are
Welcome. Where the hell have you been? That's all I have to say to you right now. Where the hell have you been? What's going on now? What's the deal? Where the hell have you been?
would you shut up? Okay, Mark, first of all, it's a huge honor to meet you. Been wanting to work with you for ages.
I'm gonna need you to explain yourself right now.
Yeah, I'm trying. If you...
There's just no excuses right now. There's no excuses at all.
What?
You know, you're here now. Oh, why not then?
But...
What's going on with you? You too busy?
Yes! Okay, I had work, I had personal tragedy, I had existential crises, I had a mil... Well, screw you! Well, believe it. I've been busy! Yes, I have. Hello, old-timers and newcomers. I am Cool Scratches, and thank you so much for joining me yet again to take another look at what I found. It's been a weird few months for me. I got to put my hand in a running lawnmower engine. I saved frogs from being turned into sashimi. I stared into the nameless abyssal darkness whereunto falls our decaying matter like ashes from burning human candles. And then I made enough money to update my library, so we will ride out this year, don't you worry. But there are still a few stragglers left behind, so... I mean, there's no rush. I mean, I can do something old this time, something new next time. So what am I doing this time? Well... I can't think of a good segue, so M Night Shyamalan's The Visit. Shyamalan is one of those directors very few people claim they don't have an opinion about. You know him and you love him or hate him based on the company you keep, or what strangers online say about him. Personally, I haven't watched a lot of his movies, but a lot of the time I find them too awkward and puzzling to really get into them. I've heard a lot of people loved Glass and Split, and a lot of people hated The Lady in the Water and The Happening, but The Visit? I don't know. I mean, I've watched it, but I don't know what people thought of it. I do know Doug Walker, the nostalgia critic, usually hates Shyamalan movies, but he thought very highly of The Visit, and I mean, he is a lifelong movie buff with a career as a critic that spans almost 15 years and one of my original inspirations, so of course I think his sense of judgment is impeccable.
I liked it fine.
Yeah, me too.
A little full of itself, but good music and imagination.
Fair enough.
Do you think he made that review deliberately awful so people would talk about that instead of... So what's The Visit about? Well, it's about family and the love they feel for each other, strained and tested by the vicissitudes of maturity, diversity and dichotomy of what they all want from life. Many years ago, a woman once left her mother and father, never to be seen by them again. This same mother and father now reaches across the rift with the hope of seeing their grandchildren for the very first time. The possibilities of this intense drama unfolding in real life speaks to the oldest child, Becca, an aspiring documentarian who gleefully accepts their invitation with the hope of mending the relationship between her mother and grandparents and catch the entire process on film. With her comes her younger brother Tyler, and together they make that leap across the gap to see their grandparents for the very first time. But family or not, these people taking him into their house, far away from civilization, cell towers and safety, are strangers. Strange old people that only seem more alien by the day, and make the children question if they're even safe. It's a Shyamalan film. Odds are the kids are in fact aliens, and it's all an attempt to infiltrate human civilization in preparation for a benevolent coup, because they have deemed us unfit to rule ourselves. So, let's watch The Visit and find out if the actual movie is as interesting and boring as I just described. In spite of the traditional info dump, the film begins with Katherine Hahn explaining the premise to the audience.
I told the kids
They said they wanted to go. I told them I didn't want them to go. They said they were going to go anyway. They're brats, what can I tell you?
You might recognize her as Agatha Harkness from WandaVision. I recognize her from How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. My mom ruled the TV set when I was younger. I kind of like her though. She's frazzled and nervous and tries way too hard to appear like she's not falling apart, but devotes all of that energy towards her kids. It's good of Shyamalan to show she loves them early on, because she's gonna be on a cruise for most of the movie, just to make the kids that little bit more helpless. I have to say as well, I'm unexpectedly impressed with the cinematography in this film. With Becca, played by Olivia de Jong, attempting to make a documentary, the attempts at artsy shots and exposition feels less awkward than it could have been. But they also had the sense to not force character introductions where it didn't feel natural, but it's still Shyamalan.
You a film prodigy? You know, I used to be a pretty good actor.
Oh, my camera light's
I am
blinking.
disgraced, impeached, and baffled here.
That didn't lead anywhere. So let's move on to meeting Nana and Pop-Up, played by Deanna Donegan and Peter McRobbie. They're elderly, simple folk who greet the youngsters with open arms and uncertainty about the camera. Honestly, I can't blame them for that, but never mind. It doesn't matter in the spur of this moment, as they're simply happy to finally have a family. Quick into the car with them so the visit can begin and they can settle into the family house of their mothers. But first, just a quick bit of artsy stuff.
She used to wait out here in this when her friends would come over.
This is the perfect cinematic image to open the documentary. Wait! Wait, don't touch it. Just let it organically swing.
The characterization in this film is actually very good, and normal by Shyamalan standards. I mean, Becca, she is interested in film and takes this project very seriously. A bit unusual perhaps, but not bizarre, and Tyler, he raps.
The girls, they like me. They think I'm sweet like candy. One girl looked at me like I was a Hershey. But
He's good, it's just I don't like rap music. And that's the thing about a lot of this movie. I see a lot of skill in its direction, and there's plenty of things about it that I think are clever to think about, but that doesn't mean it holds my interest. For example,
We're looking for visual tension. Things that pull the frame, things that force us to imagine what is beyond the frame.
that implication is basically telling the audience to overthink everything that's about to happen. It's subtle without being awkward, but I don't think Shyamalan needed to tell us to do that, because that's how all slow burn horror movies work. It's clever for the sake of being clever and doesn't make anything more interesting.
Just try to be formal, as in classicism, moments that are...
That was still funny. But I've talked about mechanics for long enough. Let's riff on the story. Where other siblings might bicker to the borderline of hate, Becca and Tyler are well comfortable in each other's presence. When Pop-Up comes in to inform them it's bedtime, he finds them in an adorable sibling moment that closes the first chapter of the story. But the end of the day prefaces the night, and where the house had shone with familial warmth, it's now distorted and strange. Nana, as Becca had come to know her, was a kindly lady who baked the world's best walnut cookies, and she has to have some before bed. So, retracing the naughty steps their mother would have taken at that same age, she quietly makes her way through the dark with the savory sweet loot in mind for a quick nighttime kitchen raid. But she never gets that far. So, Harry, you see an old woman vomiting and your first instinct is to run away? The fact that I can relate to you is irrelevant. In the morning, Nana seems wholly indifferent from the day before, but rather than ask her about it directly, Becca politely goes behind Nana's back and asks Pop-Up about it. He tells her she's an old lady, Becca. She gets sick sometimes, which is, well, sad but fair, and it's not worth thinking too hard about. So she doesn't. Instead, she lets Tyler goad her into playing hide-and-seek beneath the house in what I think is one of the weirder scenes of the movie.
You better hide, my ethnically confused friend. One Mississippi.
The children willfully loses themselves in the callow security of the country haunt where their mother would have once played. But before long their safe haven is invaded, as Nana threateningly begins chasing them around the soiled crawl space. Gone is the quiet security of the elderly homemaker, replaced by a cackling stray cat toying with murine prey. The children just about manages to flee the foundation, only to find the warm presence of Nana return, giggling like a schoolgirl at the game they just played. In concept it's pretty unnerving, but the more you think about it, the more you realize it's pretty frickin' senseless. First of all, how do you play hide and seek in a grid pattern when the pillars are too thin to hide behind? Tag maybe, but hide and seek? Secondly, there is a lot of yelling in the scene, yet they somehow can't hear each other. It's not like there's walls distorting the sound, the scene just needed them to be lost and confused, and so they are. Thirdly, while the actors, music and cinematography does a good job of making it seem scary, at no point doesn't it look like Nana isn't just playing with them. Honestly, the most disturbing thing about this is Nana's ass. A visitor comes by.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sam. I work at the hospital where your grandparents counsel. Are you making a movie? I used to be an actor back in my day.
Everyone used to be an actor! The doctor came by to ask if everything is okay, because Nana and Pop-Up hasn't shown up for a few days, but they're old, they forget, they're overwhelmed, it's all good. What's really important is Tyler decides to find out what's in the shed. Pop-Up keeps coming down there and he's very quiet about it. Maybe it's a dead body. How exciting! But the thrill quickly turns to horror, as Tyler is met by a miasmic wall of theater, and a murmuring of flies in the thousands, buzzing around a horrible stench, centered around an indeterminate collection of paper and... It's shit! Ew.
Your Pop-Pop has incontinence. He hides his accidents in the shed, and then I think he burns them out in the field.
Okay, so it was just character development and... unfortunately a very real part of growing older for a lot of people, but now that we've gone there, we can just move on. It doesn't have to be awkward, we can move on. I mean, it's not like they established this to return to it at some point later on in the movie. It's nothing to think about or mention. Papa takes them into town to show them around where their mother grew up, and for a moment they forget about the discomfort. Until...
That fella keeps staring at us. Stop following me.
No, don't!
He's following me!
Whoa, I'm not following. That was crazy. He's as strong as a wrestler. He's old. They get confused.
It's true. If you work in home care, it's unfortunately very common for some of the elderly to confuse the care workers for burglars and attack them. You would think the disturbing reality of that would make this even more frightening, but it's Shyamalan. I expect weirdness you would not think a dragon chaser to come up with. Okay, you got me. There's a lot of things Pop-Up and Nana haven't told them. The truth is, Nana suffers from sundown syndrome. It's a form of dementia that's triggered by nightfall, where she becomes restless and confused. Or so the movie says. In reality, sundown syndrome isn't even recognized as a real phenomenon and attributed to diagnosticians misinterpreting the outburst of certain Alzheimer's patients. But pointing that out would make the werewolf simile fall flat, so let's move on.
People are scared of old people for no reason.
Ironic. In a moment of childhood terror, Nana asks Becca to crawl inside the oven so she can clean it. To which I would have 4 words for the old bint, but in a admittedly very uncomfortable scene, she really does get in there. But Nana isn't a witch in a gingerbread house, she wouldn't turn it on or anything. What she would do is have a small interview with Becca about her mother and what their home life was like. For a moment, all seems fine, but when Becca starts asking about the night her mother left the house, things take a strange turn. Nana grows agitated and frantic, like a puppet violently torn in every direction. There's no reasoning with her. She's not going to tell Becca whatever happened that night. There's simply no way around it. It's a lesson Becca has trouble understanding, that a camera doesn't give her the right to prod. The next morning, she tries to get Tyler to open up, to talk about how hurt and wounded he feels by their dad leaving them, so she can relate it to the night their mom left her parents. It annoys her when he doesn't give her the answers she wants. But when she asks him to interview her, and Tyler does the same to her, it's all she can do not to cry. This doesn't actually lead anywhere, but it's nice to know that they're human beings and not just automatons. Tyler suggested to Becca they set up a camera to record Nana at night, and while at first she refused, today their grandparents' behavior grows so disturbing it convinces Becca it may be for the best. Oh, also, Tyler is a germaphobe. It hasn't really been relevant until now, but it needs to be established along with him freezing when he's overwhelmed. Night comes, and with it the werewolf rouses from its slumber. Nana walks the halls, slamming doors and crawling on the floor. The camera catches her shuffling from the shadows only to vanish in the distance, her sounds growing faint until they fade into nothing, and leaves the camera unable to see her. Am I really supposed to be at all surprised when she... An inelegant jump scare is not the most harrowing thing the camera catches, as in her delirium Nana picks up the camera and sets it to catch the moment she plans to enter the kid's room with a knife. The only thing that kept them alive was Pop-Up's advice to lock the door when they go to bed, and in the morning Becca makes the decision they are leaving tonight. Because apparently she treasures her artistic integrity more than her and Tyler's lives. Because at first she needs to record the moments that will give her mother closure. I'm sorry, screw her closure, get out of there! They don't, of course, they stay until nightfall. And did I say the scene with the crawl space confused me? This entire segment is off. They do as Becca said and stay away from their grandparents, except when they don't. When they offer to do the interviews Becca has been asking for, she sets it up. And it seems both Nana and Pop-Up have decided to give up the pretense, because during the interviews they both let enough slip to reveal they're not just old and confused, they're downright insane.
Great. Our Pop-Up has schizophrenia, and our Nana becomes Michael Myers when the sun goes down.
She is way more threatening than Michael Myers. The reason this confuses me is because between interviews they still stay away from their grandparents, in the same place, doing the same thing, pretending to play with a ball. And they repeat this 3 times over, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside. They're supposed to try appearing as if they don't suspect the elderly are going to harm them, aren't they? Anyway, when it's Nana's turn in the chair, at first it starts as horribly as Becca's first attempt to interview her, so to calm Nana down, she phrases the events as a story, where a princess falls in love despite her parents' wishes. And she leaves the castle, never talking to them again, making the king and queen very angry. And she asks Nana what she would want the king and queen to do. It's pretty neat when she says if she was in their place, she would forgive her daughter. But now it's time to leave. They call up their mother on Becca's laptop and tells her she needs to come get them right this instant. Grandpa and Grandma are acting bizarre, they're afraid they might harm them, or themselves, and... You know how Shyamalan is famous for always putting in a massive twist in his movies? It's been strangely absent, hasn't it?
Those aren't your grandparents.
Shyamalan did it again! Yes. Earlier in the movie, Nana spilled some cookie dough over the camera on Becca's computer, so Mommy hasn't been able to see them until now. By extension, she never saw who was in the house with them. These people they've been living with for the past week, they're not her parents. She's never seen them before in her life. What previously was a mild worry now grows to a palpable panic as the children realize how unsafe they are. They're stranded with two severely psychotic strangers that spent the past week pretending as if they're family, and all they can do is keep up the pretense until Mom and the police arrive. Hours from now. And 3 things confuse me about this. 1, they know these people aren't actually their grandparents. 2, they know they are in clear and present physical danger. And 3, just in the kitchen, Becca is surrounded by weapons of convenience. Why don't they just crack some eggs and then leg it? I mean, I suppose you could argue they're afraid of the shotgun that was established earlier that I skipped over, but the reason I skipped over it is because it doesn't make an appearance for the rest of the movie. I think even Shyamalan forgot it existed. While Becca and Tyler struggle to keep the pretense up, Pop-Up and Nana's masks are slipping. Their behavior grows more severe, like barely restrained madness struggling to break free. Blaming failing batteries, Becca leaves Tyler alone with her demented captors so she can scour the basement where she finds the people that would be her real grandparents, dead and preserved in the cold, hidden away in a corner. Despite his mental state, Pop-Up is clear-headed enough to realize Becca would find them and confronts her. He tells her his name is Mitchell, and he tells her how Claire, the woman upstairs, drowned her own children in a suitcase. He thought she deserved a week as a grandmother. Her madness is only equaled by his own, and in their demented love they murdered her grandparents and took their place. And they're all dying tonight. He left Tyler bruised and broken on the floor, too overwhelmed to do anything but whimper as Becca yells for him to run while Mitchell drags her up the stairs and locks her in a room with Claire, who has now gone fully werewolf. See? I told you it was important to establish that Tyler freezes when he's stressed. Otherwise it would have seemed cliché to just say he was frozen in fear. Wait. No, wait, this is Shyamalan. He doesn't have the balls to do something like that. So, why is he taking off his pants? No. No.
You have a problem with germs, don't you?
Ew! Ew! Just... ew! Let's pretend that didn't happen and just focus on Becca instead. She does a very awkward ghost footage movie where for some reason she keeps taking the camera off of Claire and Claire gets a bit closer every time. Then she's chased around the room and Claire decides to wear a bedsheet because that's scary? It all comes to a head, literally, when Claire bashes Becca into a mirror, freeing a massive shard of glass she plunges into the old woman's throat before she bashes the lock open with the camera. This unexpectedly potent mix of fear and anger carries her to the kitchen, where she runs at Mitchell with no plan or intent other than keeping him away from Tyler. He easily shrugs her off, but when the fight leaves her, it breaks Tyler out of his panicked state and he rushes Mitchell, knocking him against the counter before slamming his head into the fridge again and again and again and again. And it's actually kind of funny because mentally he returns to a football game he played when he was 8 years old and he keeps shouting things like, "Stay on the runner!" and "What is hips?" The movie is resolved faster than Cujo as the police and their mother arrives immediately afterwards. But the movie isn't over yet. There's still the elixir, the resolution Becca was talking about, and so their mother finally comes clean. The horrible thing that happened between her and her parents was she fell in love with her professor, and they did not approve. The night she left, their argument was worse than ever, and she slapped her mother before her father slapped her. And then she left. They tried to get back in touch with her. They reached out to her several times, but every time she ignored it. There was no reason for Becca to try and seek forgiveness between her mom and her parents because it was there whenever she wanted it. And we definitely cared about all of this. But I don't. That was The Visit. And I make fun of it, but it's not a train wreck. It's just not very good. Shyamalan is a divisive director at the best of times, with a lot of people hating him and a lot of people loving him. You can't claim the man hasn't made some fantastic films, but he's also made some awful films. This film feels like a perfect medley between Shyamalan at his best and his worst, and I think the esteem you hold the film in depends on what you think of the man overall. Me personally, I come down on the side of finding the film absolutely flaccid. There is a lot to like about it. It sets up a situation where the audience can experience the anxiety about being isolated with strangers. It makes sure to gradually build tension without truly crossing the line into certain danger. Every character has unique personalities that build off of one another until the end, and it's certainly a lot prettier and steadier than the average found footage film. And while I think it would have worked just as well without it, the handheld cameras bring the audience into the moment with the characters. All of this could have worked to make the film into a masterpiece, and if that's all you see, you would love it. But for all the things the film does alright, it does just as much poorly. My main issue is a lot of the horror is only skin deep. It looks like it's supposed to be frightening in that it kind of reminds of things that were frightening in other movies. The slow panning shots reminds of scenes that were tense in other movies. Having the threat chase after the characters reminds of times that was scary in other movies. But when you actually start to think about it, you realize the scenes only look scary but aren't really. They just appear to be because of the editing and the actors. I can honestly say not one actor did a bad job in this film. Even the kids delivered stellar performances that, if I'd only seen the first 10 or so minutes, would have convinced me they're real people. The way they hung on to their one character trait was a bit odd at times, but that's down to Shyamalan's writing, not the actors. Speaking of the writing, like the rest of the film, it's good if you only look at the broad strokes. The overall plot, the abstracts of the scenes, the progression, the pacing, etc. But then Shyamalan made bizarre creative choices like Pop-Up's monologue, alluding to Hansel and Gretel, thinking we care about what happened between the mom and her parents, and Becca keeping the documentary going even when they realized they were in danger, and 100 other things that seem written by a neural network that studied film but didn't actually understand it. The Visit is a good film, but not a good horror film or found footage film. Despite its pretty surface, there are too many aspects of it that I don't understand, and even among fans of Shyamalan's work, I don't see anyone listing this very high on his great achievements. I sentence The Visit to a 6 on a scale of 11. I felt a bit tone deaf making this review, but when am I not? I'm sorry if I'm a bit rusty as well. It's been a while since I made one of these, but I am back in the saddle, and I will find my rhythm soon enough. Thank you all for watching. I have been Core Scratches, and I hope you will join me again next time to take another look at what I found.